Welcome to the game commentary for Tomb Raider Anniversary. I'm Jason Botta, the creative director for Tomb Raider Anniversary.
And I'm Toby Gard, the original designer from the first TR1.
Ah, you were the creative director. Give yourself some credit.
There's only six of us, though. I mean, we don't have such grand titles back in those days, but yeah. So, in terms of the opening sequences of the original game, the whole thing was leading up to sort of the whole wolf extravaganza that happens, where it was kind of the big reveal of Lara Croft. And obviously, some of that wasn't really appropriate anymore. People know who Lara was, so it enabled us to actually be able to show Lara in the intro, in the foyer in Calcutta, and obviously we didn't have to go quite so crazy with the wolf bit with the big tails flying off of her and stuff.
And I think the essence of that whole cinematic and whatnot is the same, sort of an introduction to the main characters of the game, and sort of sets up what the entire game is about. So that sort of remains unchanged.
Yep.
Yeah, we sort of tried to follow a lot of the shots from the original game, sort of inspiration for us throughout the entire game, but for this opening scene as well.
So I remember when we were first putting together the design for Tomb Raider, and I found that it was pretty disturbing how many games, how much there was of killing in games. Basically, so many people killing each other mindlessly. You know, you walk up to some chap, and just because they're from a different country, you can gun them down, and that seems to be perfectly reasonable. So in TR1, I felt like, apart from the fact that I didn't think we could do very good humans at the time, like other human enemies, it seemed to me like a much nicer thing to do to have the enemies be animals, sort of, you know, vicious animals like bats and rats and things.
Which is ironic because I think now most people would consider killing animals way crueler than killing people.
It is, yeah. I mean, pretty much, yeah, the worst thing about it is, of course, they're all endangered species. None of this occurred to me at the time. To be honest with you, I just thought, great, we're not killing humans hardly at all. What a great selling point.
When we redid it, we went and we looked at the animals in TR1, and they weren't very mean looking, which made killing them even worse.
I remember my teddy bear model was very cute.
That's right, so we consciously tried to sort of go back and make the animals much more vicious this time around, so you didn't feel so bad about killing them. You could maybe only lose about an hour of sleep instead of all night.
So this was one of the rooms, the Wolf Bridge room, essentially. So early on in the game, in the original Tomb Raider, where it's really just, hey look, there's going to be some big baddies that you're going to fight at some point, but you're able to sort of stand above them and shoot them to death.
And Lara's so mean.
Yeah, well, boy, you could just leave them alone, I suppose. There's nothing really going on in that room in the original TR1, and I was sort of pushing for us to simply, you know, just skip this room on the remake because it wasn't particularly significant, but
yeah, I think visually it was one of the more sort of recognizable areas from TR1 though, so we wanted to keep it but sort of change it a little bit. So I think it was you that had the idea, right, of breaking the first bridge so that you fall down into the wolf area.
Yeah, so really basically make life difficult for the animal lovers.
Right. You have to kill the wolves now, or they kill you.
The people who didn't kill the wolves, didn't snipe the wolves, basically get the worst deal.
That's right. Plus it makes the second bridge a little bit more intense now.
That's the big one, yeah. This room, in the original, it was the goal to try and create a sense of reality to sort of the progression. Like, we had to separate Peru into 4 levels, but when we were designing them, we made them so that they were supposed to fit together. We tried to keep the big door at one end, and then you'd be popping out on the other side into the new level. So they were very continuous, essentially 4 continuous massive levels, but they were split into chunks. One of the improvements is that actually happens now seamlessly, so you carry on through it, and it's a little easier that way to be able to tell what some of the areas were supposed to be. And this particular area was supposed to be essentially a fortified entrance to their city, whereby you've got arrow areas, these sloped walls, and then holes for people to be able to, I don't know what they do, chuck rocks at people, or throw stones, or call them names and stuff, leading to the actual main entrance.
Right, it was sort of the last fortitude of the Vilcabambans against the invading Spaniards.
Evil Spanish.
That's right. And originally you came in sort of up top in one of the side areas and sort of worked your way around. But we felt that we really wanted to make the players play the route of the Spanish invaders, since that's essentially what Lara is. She's sort of coming in and going into the home of the natives here. So we wanted to make her run the gauntlet down the center.
So when we were first setting up what kind of levels, what kind of areas we wanted to go for, Incan areas, obviously, one of the big civilizations that people are very aware of and so forth. At the time, the actual Vilcabamba itself hadn't been discovered when we made TR1. It was a lost city of legend where the Incans disappeared to, and the Spanish supposedly didn't get to it. I mean, actually, I think that the current theory is the Spaniards did find it, killed everybody in there. But anyway, so by the time we come to remake, they've actually found Vilcabamba. It doesn't look anything like this for some reason. I don't know why, but yeah.
Yeah, when we came to sort of remake this village area, one of the things that was interesting was when Toby was like, we're going to remake the village, and everybody was like, there's a village? Where? And I think it was sort of one of the things in TR1, just because of the way they built it, sort of the fact that there was this village where everyone lived was sort of unclear. So we really wanted to sort of reinterpret the idea of there being a village to sort of clarify that to the user that, oh, look, it's actually a town and a civilization, and there are these little huts. So we sort of kept the individual areas that were in there the same, but we completely relaid it all out and made a big wide open space in the middle where you could sort of see everything all at once and get the real sense that there was a civilization that lived in this area. So this was sort of the exit from the town proper into the more depths of the cave that this Incan civilization had built.
It was one of those spots in the original TO1 where I'm a big fan of sort of symmetric level design, because people generally, when they're building architecture, tend to be fairly symmetric about their efforts. It gives you interesting ability to sort of reuse the idea of a space but change it based on the amount of ruin that's going on inside it. So I like that repeat, and the two-towered gateway into the Lost Valley was one of those spots.
Yeah, and we kept that essentially the same. The only thing I think we changed is we actually have physics in the game now, which didn't have in TR1, so we made the opening of the door done by Lara's physical interaction with the lock pieces themselves.
So waterfall area, basically entranceway essentially to the Lost Valley, was definitely one of the more memorable bits, I think, that people... It's one of many places in TR1 where the obsession with putting things behind waterfalls was played around with. I like this idea of looking behind waterfalls. I don't know why, that's pretty bizarre, isn't it? So we actually hid the main temple, where you're actually trying to get to is physically behind the waterfall. So the progression takes you beyond the point where you actually end up, if you see what I mean, into an area with more waterfalls.
That's right. With secrets behind them too, actually.
That's the way. That's exactly the way, right? Yes.
Yeah, it was really interesting when we went back and remade this area. We built it really close to the original scale of the room in Tomb Raider 1 the first time, and everybody that played it thought that the waterfall was too small. And it sort of gets at the point that when we're remaking something that people sort of are remembering playing, that their memory of it's different than the actual game. And so we ended up making the waterfall a lot bigger than it was originally to live up to people's expectations of what it should be. Strangely enough, this is actually one of the areas that I remember the most from Tomb Raider 1, was jumping back and forth across this river.
Well, it was wanting to ramp sort of the... because we didn't have nice save systems, pretty much. If you died, you're going to be playing at least almost half a level, right, to get back to where you were. So jumping across the waterfall was just a way to sort of be kinder with the reset. So if you fell down the hole, basically it just dropped you into the waterfall. It's kind of like a little white water rafting ride, and sort of spectacular, and that was it. Which I suppose is different now, because it's actually kind of crueler now to do that, because with save points being so liberally scattered around. Like having to actually ride all the way down the waterfall back into the original area is more of a punishment than just dropping people onto spikes.
That's right, because we made the traversal up the waterfall so much more intricate now. It is a little bit crueler. Yeah, it adds to the tension.
It does.
And at the end of the cog puzzle, which we obviously changed, but still left a little homage to the end of the passage up above the waterfall ends with a wall with cogs on it, which was the site of the original puzzle.
Yeah.
But we've henceforth moved it into the waterfall area itself. The Lost Valley is probably the most memorable part of Tomb Raider 1. And it's really funny because listening to people talk about it, a lot of people remember it being in a cave. And that was because you had really bad draw distance and it just sort of went out to black fog.
Well, pretty much we only had one fog colour, which was black. So we couldn't actually, even though we wanted to have sort of an open top, we couldn't really do it. I think actually it's black at the top. So it's as if it was night time or something, I suppose, but it was supposed to be an outside area.
And now it really is.
Yeah, but it looks quite a lot better. So, yeah, T-Rex in the original, that was probably the most memorable bit for a lot of people, I think.
Absolutely.
It was one of the early 3D games, and having that guy hove out the darkness at you, out of the draw distance, was pretty frightening. And it was a lot of fun animating because it was pretty much an instant death situation if you were underneath his mouth. He just bit down and shook you about like a little terrier or something, shaking out his little toy. Little legs would fly everywhere, and then he'd spit on the ground, and it was all part of the fun. That kind of was the basis for always making Lara's deaths as horribly cruel and painful looking as possible in the first game.
And now he's back, and he's a good deal bigger than he was. And that sort of goes back to what we talked about a little bit earlier, which was that people's memory of things is different than what it was. We made the T-Rex originally about half the size he is now, and ended up having to double him in size to sort of ramp up the feel and the intensity and make him scary and everything still. So now he's ginormous. He's a humongous T-Rex, way bigger than a real T-Rex would have actually been.
Right, but that's alright. And then obviously adding in the kind of concept that you use the environment against him instead of just shooting him, because that was always the problem with the TR1 bosses, was that we didn't have time to really do anything special for the fights against the bigger monsters. It's still just essentially just putting as much lead in them as physically possible, and adding in the environmental stuff to this seemed like the most sensible way to big up that combat. In the original, earlier on in the level, we had put in a switch over a trapdoor, and you pull the switch, and the trapdoor literally drops you away into some water. So you sort of like go, "Oh, that's so cruel," but then you're in water and it's totally fine. So just sort of to freak you out and give you a bit of a scare. And so what we did this time with this particular room, once you get to the final temple, you pull the switch, because everybody always runs over and pulls switches, and it drops you straight into combat,
into the wolf den, as it were.
Yeah.
This was one of the rooms that I liked very much and wanted to keep. We talked for a while about possibly not including this area. So we were sort of trying to decide what areas to pick from Tomb Raider 1, but it was one of my favorite areas because of the cruelty of it all.
Yeah.
So I wanted to keep it, and now it's in there. And you too can get owned by wolves. It's good.
One of the interesting things about the sequence of Lara going to Natla's office was how she went up the elevator shaft, because when we were looking at the sequence, it seemed like it was going to be pretty boring in the original game. Her just breaking into an office and going up, rifling through Natla's drawers. So we came up with this idea of her using the counterweight to fly up the lift shaft, and it's kind of interesting because I remember that basically that actually got sort of, plagiarised a slight way. No, not plagiarised. What's the word? It was homaged in the Matrix movie, which was pretty cool actually. And then in remaking the office section, we decided to use that space to actually build a little bit more information on Natla, because we don't really get to see a lot of Natla. So we came up with this idea of, instead of Lara originally just read some kind of diary, she gets to look through Natla's
Video logs.
exactly, and we get a little bit of backstory both on Larson and Pierre, and it was an interesting way to sort of get more character going on without Lara having to sort of interact with them or change the sequences too much. So originally, old Pierre, you just fight him here. He just runs out and starts gunning you down, basically. But we wanted to, well, first of all, make a character that was a little bit more interesting than just to shoot first and ask questions later. But we also wanted to sort of keep one of the aspects of Pierre that made him really interesting in the first game, or I really liked about him anyway, which is that pretty much you had to fight him about 3 or 4 times throughout the level, and you'd shoot him loads and loads of times, and then he just suddenly decided, that's it, I'm running away, and he just, as soon as he went out of line of sight, he'd just vaporize, basically.
Which was a little cheap.
Yeah, so when we came to doing the remake, I was going, that's great! I love the way that he just, like, goes behind a pillar and vanishes, and everyone's going, no, it's rubbish, it's ridiculous, where does he go? So we actually decided to play on that in the cutscene and have him sort of be sort of this ninja guy who could be anywhere behind any pillar, potentially, and basically work that into the cutscene.
St. Francis Folly is I would say probably the second most recognizable area from Tomb Raider 1, other than the T-Rex Valley. I think a lot of people really remember that sort of big vertical room and the climbing up the broken thing in the middle. So, I mean, we really wanted to sort of keep that feel when we redid it, and then just sort of make it more involved and sort of more challenging to the player this time. But essentially it's pretty much unchanged. We even sort of went back and duplicated the textures from the original for like the floor panels in the middle, because they're sort of so recognizable.
Yeah, I mean it was an interesting sort of goal with that area when we were, because it's quite common that game designers, even when they have a 3D vertical sort of space that they can play with, they tend to sort of end up just making long flat things anyway. So that particular area from the original game was just sort of, let's go as vertical as we possibly can and see what we can do with it. And it was great with Lara being so sort of easy to kill. It was such a frightening space to move through. And you know, as usual with Anniversary, everything is double the size now, so it's even more frightening looking.
This wasn't even a room in the first game, it was a hallway with a ball at the top.
We didn't even have time to actually build Atlas. The whole idea was that there'd be this statue with, you know, obviously the chap with the big rolling ball, which was one of the small number of actual generic tools we could use to make our puzzles, and have it sitting on his back and textured like the world. We just didn't have time to do any of that, so we just had the ball at the top of a ramp and left the rest of it to people's imaginations.
That's right. So now we've actually been able to build Atlas.
Woo!
Yeah, so that's good. And there he is, and he rolls the ball down, essentially. The theme is the same. We just sort of added the added difficulty of having a pit at the end. In the original, you just sort of hid behind a ledge and let the ball roll over you, didn't you?
No, that was the same. It was basically you had to drop down into the pit.
Yeah.
Let the ball roll over the top of you because it would fly over the top.
Yeah. So
you made it a bit more complicated.
It's a tad bit more complicated, but thematically identical. Except we actually have a statue.
Yes. The Damocles room was basically, I mean, obviously his story is about having a sword sitting over his head. So the plan with the room was basically that you walk in and you see this like forest of swords hanging from the ceiling, and you think that's bad news. And then you pick your way through the room and actually nothing happens to you. But, you know, there's a prize at the end of the room, and you just know what's going to happen when you take it. So it's kind of really building that expectation of when the swords come flying towards you, like magic missiles.
That's right. We just sort of took that concept and ramped it up, and now we've got swords in the walls and swords in the floor. It's sword-tastic.
It dilutes a little bit the whole sword from the ceiling, though, which is the legend.
True.
Neptune.
Neptune. Yeah. So originally the Neptune room was essentially just a hole in the floor with a little pool of water, wasn't it?
How dare you? No, like the goal with the Neptune area was to actually give people a sense of real claustrophobia underwater. So it was an extremely long shaft, and the moment you stepped into it, it sucked you all the way down to the bottom. And I wanted to get this feeling of like that terror of being, deep underwater and knowing that you can hardly swim back. So because the draw distance on the original Tomb Raider, basically it faded to black after not very far. The cool thing about the Neptune room was that you get sucked down this hole so far that you can't. It's black above you. You can't even see the surface anymore, and it was that horror of being pulled down to your doom that I was trying to get with the Neptune room. And then basically you have to just find a switch and turn off the current and swim up just in the nick of time. But
Sure.
What did you guys do? Looks pretty crazy.
Yeah. So we took that original area where you get sucked down, and then we built an entire new room off the side of that. So instead of just pulling the switch and swimming back up, now you pull the switch and you go into an entirely new room themed around Neptune and water. Though, you know what? I just realized we renamed this room.
What did you rename it to?
It's Poseidon.
Oh, it's good.
Yeah, see, goes back to originally Toby not knowing who the Greek and the Roman gods were.
Oh, well, it's not as bad a mistake as Thor, though, is it?
It's true. Yeah. So while the original room was Neptune, this is now the Poseidon room. So that it's the same god, just now it's appropriate to Greece.
Yeah.
So that works out fictionally better. But the room's still sort of all water-centric. And you just sort of swim around and do stuff and get the thing and then swim back up the hole.
Your doom.
Well, you still got to swim back up. There's no doom. Toby doesn't like it.
In the original, the idea of the two sections of the room was the first one was obviously just essentially sort of it was kind of really just basically a random death machine. So you had this checkered pattern on the floor, and you're supposed to sort of be able to, I think, tell where the next lightning bolt was supposed to come, and then try and avoid that area. But in reality, you just had to run across as fast as you possibly could in case you get fried.
This is quality design. Random death.
Random death machine. Do you realise how much time we had? Anyway, so after the random death machine, the concept of the next room actually was, I like the idea of having to put yourself like into the most dangerous position you possibly get, right?
Right.
Where
Under the hammer.
You have to physically stand under the hammer and then wait for it kind of like to crank back and then drop, and you have to just run off at the last second. And that was particularly evil in the first one because Lara moved so slowly. She took so long to react to anything. So you kind of... It really made for the situation where you'd sort of stand on the pressure plate and then you kind of run off and go, oh, and it didn't trigger, and you go, oh, it's a little bit too much of a chicken that time, and you'd run back and go, woo, run off. Well, at least that's what I used to do anyway.
The Coliseum this time is round.
Yeah, I see that. It's a really major improvement. Didn't have any angles apart from the right angles, obviously first time round, so it does look quite a lot more like Coliseum. Yeah,
we tried.
Impressive. And it's particularly impressive when you think that, again, Coliseum isn't Greek, is it?
Yeah, no, it's not Greek, but we just sort of fudged it.
Yeah.
It's Toby's fault because he put it in the first game.
Yeah.
We had to put it in this one.
But it was Romany Greeky. I wasn't too bothered. But it's a cool idea, I thought, to be able to, because really kind of the concept of Tomb Raider 1 was just this idea that when I go to these sort of places, Coliseum or Stonehenge or any of these sort of ancient ruins, I personally have a terribly strange urge to climb all over them, see where I can get to. And I thought, hey, if I want to do that, then maybe other people do. So getting the Coliseum in there seemed like a cool idea because it's sort of exploring around on the inside, and we tried to create the rooms, obviously, that have been recreated here again, which are things like the gladiator areas and the places, the animal pits. and just tried to let people sort of string together the story of how the area would have actually worked, centuries before in their own heads.
That's right. This game, like most games, is fantasy fulfillment, right? So it's all about exploring the ruins that you couldn't really explore if you went to Rome and went to the Coliseum.
Yeah, there's too many people telling you, hey, get off that ancient bit of rock there, you crazy monkey man.
That's right. You're going to break it.
Mm. In the first one, it was all you had to do essentially was, I think you had to pick up a couple of keys down in
and then go around the top, right?
And then, there was like a specific route around the outside. And obviously, Pierre showed up again in the first one and did his disappearing behind pillars trick, which was really pretty cool. But it was a very simple area. Basically, just unlock a couple of keys and then go up to the king's viewing, or the emperor's viewing area, Caesar, I suppose, which was full of monkeys. And then, get out of there into the next area.
They're still monkeys. They're gorillas. They throw stuff now.
So, what did you do? Go on. Tell us all about how you went about expanding it.
Yeah, so the original, we sort of kept the idea the same. We just wanted to sort of, obviously Laura's more nimble now, so we had to sort of increase the sort of level of detail in her interactions with the environment. So we just sort of made the environments more complex. We've got her traversing over various ruins and bits of broken column and pieces of the ceiling that have fallen out. So essentially it's the same. It's just sort of updated to match sort of the abilities of Lara. The Midas Garden, I think we sort of we did the thing you guys intended, which was to build the Midas statue.
Yeah, I mean, the garden itself was supposed to have... Well, exactly. I mean, we had... we just didn't have the resources to build a gigantic statue in the garden.
Right.
So it's pretty much... you had to... There was a garden, and if you climbed about on the roof, you could find a little room that had a hand in it, basically. And
it had a hand and a foot?
Yeah, and that's about as much as we could really do.
And the best part was that the foot, and like up to the knee, I think it was, and then that was the ceiling of the room.
Yes. Well, it's, roof had collapsed or something, probably.
But here we've actually gone and built the whole Midas statue. But obviously we had to keep the hand turning things to gold. That was key.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that still happens, which is cool. We originally were trying to think of a way to make the monkeys turn to gold, because that would have been really cool.
Yes, that would have been.
Yeah, but,
It's one of the few times when, in TR1, when we actually... something I remember sort of debating a little bit, because all of the other areas, all the other rooms in the Greek level, and I think, in fact, sort of throughout the whole game, they all made some kind of real-world sense, There was the traps, right? They're sort of ancient mechanisms, and it was only Midas's hand, really, that sort of eluded some kind of magical effect, something that you couldn't explain through any kind of science. And that, I remember, was a really tough call to make, because the goal was not to break the rules of sort of reality. But Lara turning to gold was so much fun to animate that I don't know, I just broke my own rules. Oh, well, I mean, pretty much the original idea for the room was just... I mean, the spikes were just a generic trap for us, basically. You could walk through them, but if you ran through them or if you fell on them, they're instant death. And they're kind of fun because you can't really tell they're there apart from the floor texture. They have little holes in it, so you had to actually keep your eyes open. I thought it was a really fun little trap. And this was just like with many of our rooms, we would essentially think about some of the basic tools we had at our disposal, and we would just try and see how we could theme a room to it. So this was pretty much originally just... Let's make Lara do loads and loads of jumps where you fall straight onto spikes because it's so painful looking when she goes on spikes.
This all gets back to Toby's love to see Lara die.
What? Look at the... Man, you put spikes on everything, haven't you?
Yeah. We took the idea of the spikes and we made it even more spiky. We gotta step up the challenge. Spikes are fun. Watching Lara get spiked is fun. Though we can't actually do that anymore. The ESRB doesn't allow us to impale Lara in a teen-rated game anymore. So, you didn't have ratings when you made TR1, did they?
Yeah, we must have done.
I don't know. You impaled her all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I mean, it wasn't a good day if Lara wasn't getting impaled.
Yeah, so, well, we can't do that anymore. But you can still get spiked and die. So at least that little fantasy lives on. So this was one of the 3 sort of challenge areas off of the Midas area.
Right, because you got 3 metal bits you have to change into gold to get a door open.
The lead bars that must be turned to gold.
Lead to gold, very alchemical. And basically, but other than the basic tools of sort of traps like rolling balls and spikes and stuff and the breakable floors, the only thing that we really could do in the original TR1 engine was essentially swap rooms. We could build 2 rooms that were identically sized, and we could swap them so long as Lara wasn't in that room, basically. So we actually managed to get quite a bit from that, and the sand puzzle was basically this kind of concept of, you know, if you was to pull out the support of a floor, then the whole room would crumble and fall apart above, type of thing, and you'd get a completely different layout. So you could essentially move across the room 2 different ways.
Right. The whole real sort of nature of Lara pulling out a foundation of a column be damned.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but and that was pretty hard for us as well, because I mean it's kind of difficult to sell the column. We just had to have like basically a block there you pulled out, and then the world sort of rumbled, and when you went upstairs it was all different. But of course, fabulous new technology.
That's right. Now you go down in the room and it rumbles and some sand falls through. And then you go back up and the room's changed.
That's good, yeah.
We've come a long way in over a decade.
It's actually one of the things I wanted to do was be able to show the actual changes that, you know, basically just sort of fake an animation of the change in environment. And we actually did that a little bit in the original TR1 on the last level, where we actually sort of cut away and showed an animated object, and then we did the room swap. And that makes it a lot stronger, but this particular one, even you guys couldn't chew off, could you? Whole room collapsing and turning into...
Yeah, that was we tried to pitch that, and the producers came back and said, no, you don't get to build 2 versions of this room. So we did one, and we did what we could. It still sells it, I think. At least as well as the original Tomb Raider did. Alright, so this originally was sort of a series of columns with fire in the middle that you had to sort of time jumping across to get to the piece at the end, and there was water on the sides. So our first little pillar here is the homage to the original Tomb Raider pillars, and then the rest of the room we completely changed. So now there's still lots of fire, but we've, added more timing elements to it to make it harder.
Well, originally, the whole point of the room actually was that there was actually it was all about the fact that Lara worked like clockwork. So if you kind of start a jump at a certain point, once she lands, there's a specific point when she can jump again, and it's not like any time. Even if you press a button earlier, it's still going to be that specific time. So you can actually do it sort of like 3 or 4 jumps in a row, and you will always jump basically at exactly the same point. So we'd been training people to sort of jump from the very edge, but what we did was we stuck this sort of start line a bit earlier, so that if you actually literally jumped or started running from there and then jumped, then you could make the entire series of jumps in one go, right? And that was the only real way to essentially get through it without being burned. And in the original Tomb Raider, what happened if you walked into fire was that a tiny little bright flame would come out of the back of her shorts, which was telling you that she was on fire, and then you could jump into the water. So actually, I think this ended up being possibly one of the biggest sort of like hardest parts in the whole game. I think pretty much everyone who played it had a massive amount of difficulty trying to actually do it, and from what I understand, I think most people defaulted to literally just running through the fire and taking health packs until they can pick up the thing at the far end and jump in the water to save themselves, which, well, didn't end up being exactly what I was hoping for.
And probably not as fun as you had originally intended.
No.
So we tried to make it more fun this time. Not so cruel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the sort of the little nook before the main cistern with the rats. Everybody loves the rats. I know when we were making the game, once the rats got in, everybody was like, "That's my favorite animal in the game." They just look so cute when they run around and then they bite you. Yeah, so we had to put rats back in. Everybody dug them. This was the big sort of cistern underneath the grease level, where all the sewage from everything ran down into.
Yeah, I mean the goal with this was to sort of just create massive water-based uber puzzle basically, and
which it still is.
It still is. It was pretty frightening. I mean, frightening level when you walk into it to actually try and work out where you can go, where you should go, and that was like one of the real challenges with trying to balance this room in the first game was, you know, when you give the player as many options as it looks like they have, it's extremely difficult to tell where they should try and actually start going and exploring. Especially since most of the actual places you can see are physically locked off by either the water level or by some other kind of door mechanism.
Yeah, and we sort of kept that theme when we redid it. I mean, it's still sort of large sections of the room are visible, but gated by water levels or gates or whatnot. So look, it's an authentic recreation of the original.
Yeah, just as frightening looking.
It is just as frightening looking and overwhelming to the player.
So, and then, all of our goal basically with the side rooms in the original game was just to sort of actually just to make life much more hellish for the player. I think that seemed to be our goal anyway, whereby, you know, you had to change the water level of the entire area more than once. So you had to do things in a prescribed order that you had no idea what that order was until you found out the hard way.
You were so cruel back then.
Yeah, it was a pretty evil part of the level, I have to say. It was hardcore.
Yeah, when we remade this room, we decided we wanted to cut off all of the side rooms and just make them like these little nooks in the wall, so that you could sort of, you never had to leave the space of the main area, and you could sort of be there when the water levels changed and whatnot. So that part is missing.
That's good,
but I think it turns out a little bit better.
And then, of course, you and your having to do everything twice as extreme changed it from one centaur crashing out of a statue into two.
That's right. We had to ramp it up for the kids.
Yeah.
The kids nowadays, they like it hardcore. So, yeah, we not only made it 2 centaurs, but we made the centaurs twice as big too.
Yes, of course.
So it's 4 times the difficulty of the original. But in our defense, we did make the centaurs less cheap than they were in Tomb Raider 1. I remember playing this, and it was like they just had machine gun fireballs coming out of their arms.
Bone chips they were.
That was a bone chip?
Yeah, the whole kind of concept with the is that the beasts, the evil beasts, they were all sort of firing off bits of themselves, little sacks of fiery doom and little bone chips at you.
That's a red fireball, dude. That's not a bone chip.
No, it's not a fireball, right? Like the original one, it looks like a sort of fleshy sack that comes flying towards you, and then when it bursts, it ignites.
Oh, is that how the igniting happened?
Well, in my head, that's how it worked.
All right, there you go. Now we know.
So in the original game, when you actually arrive at Tihocan's tomb, basically Pierre's already there, beating you to it, and he's just kind of opens fire on you, and you essentially gun him down. He's already grabbed the Scion, so you gun him down and you take his stuff. And we decided that was not so good for a couple of reasons. One was that we wanted to add more significance to sort of like her first kill, and then we also wanted to well, we didn't like the idea that Pierre sort of beat her to it. He's always kind of one step ahead in the original, so it was better that Lara actually, kind of sort of wins, but he gets the drop on her. And another thing we changed was we wanted to actually kind of sort of show a little bit of what Tihocan's about, because in the original game it's just, she finally goes in and reads about him on the tomb wall, but we wanted sort of a little bit more information about what's going on with old Tihocan.
So this is the beginning of the Egypt level. We were trying to sort of theme each of the chapters of Tomb Raider Anniversary around a sort of theme, and Egypt's theme sort of quickly turned into traps, became the sort of focus for the level. So this first area is trap-less as a sort of a soft lead into the level, but quickly we ramp up and have all sorts of nasties in this level to sort of thwart Lara at every sort of turn.
In the original, this was pretty much the whole Egypt area was supposed to be themed around this one room, and the goal was we're going to put Sphinx in. There's going to be a huge door at one side that's going to lead into the sanctuary of the Scion, where you're going to pick up the Scion, and that's going to be that. But I remember being slightly disappointed by the size of the Sphinx in the original one, and that shaped the later level to come.
That's right. When we were remaking it, we sort of went and looked at the original, and it was sort of, as Toby was saying, they tried to cram a bunch of stuff in there, like, the obelisk and the Sphinx and this giant door. So when we were remaking it, we wanted to sort of add some symmetry to the room and a little bit of balance to it, so it didn't seem such like an architectural hodgepodge. So we duplicated the Sphinx and put one on the other side and sort of aligned the room along a central axis, sort of anchored by that big pillar in the middle. So I think it sort of gives the room a little bit more believability while keeping sort of all the thematic and sort of important elements in there.
This room, literally in the original, I think was just sort of 4 blocks or something along each wall that you had to really, really imagine hard was supposed to be statues, kneeling statues, because obviously based on the old Karnak pharaohs, and it's really good to see that actually you can now be able to do justice to the concept of having these sitting chaps around the room.
Yeah, we really liked the idea of the statues moving very early on, so that sort of became the theme of how we wanted to recreate this room, was put the statues in, but then make them move about.
That's the theme of this whole Egypt level, isn't it? You guys went move crazy. It's good.
Right, so this area, sort of another one that we sort of did a good deal of repositioning of sort of the elements of the room to give the room sort of more symmetry and make it sort of feel and have a sort of a common theme to it. The original sort of had the temple of Bastet, the Egyptian cat god, sort of off on the side from where you entered the room, and we really wanted to make that the focus this time. So we sort of shifted things around and put it right when you come into the room to sort of give you a more impressive reveal of the space. Other than that, we sort of have kept most of the theme of this area the same.
Yes, it's pretty good because I think that Egypt, for the most part, was sort of the least sort of fictionally coherent of the levels, and the remake has actually really kept the spirit of the original while actually making it a lot more real.
Originally, this was pretty bland area. It was just sort of an empty room, and then you worked your way up, and then there was another room with a bunch of sand in it. This was one of those state-changing rooms where sort of the entire room changed after you pulled some switch. In this case, the sand all fell down onto the bottom room. And
actually, the cunning thing was both rooms changed, right?
Oh, that's right, actually, yeah, because the top one isn't sand anymore.
No.
That's right, so this was, then you would do that and hop out once the sand had fallen through, so we liked the idea, but we wanted to sort of spice it up a little bit, so we created this scarab puzzle here to sort of just provide a little bit more visual interest to the room, and a little bit more challenge.
In the original game, the idea of this room was basically to you come into a room and there's these six blocks and you can pull them out, and it's basically either a reward or a punishment. And actually, they were all punishments apart from one, which was the thing you were here to grab. And I kind of thought that was just it's I don't know, it seemed like a fun sort of little thing to do. But at the end of the day, once someone's died a couple of times, or once someone reads anywhere, which one is the right one to pull out, then there's no real puzzle to it. So obviously, you guys did something different this time.
Yeah, we sort of we kept the blocks and the sort of little side rooms off of it as a key to exiting the room, but we sort of added a combination lock type thing to the door, which sort of was our effort to both update the room and also to give fictionally sort of more meaning to actually getting through the room and getting into the next area, which is the big obelisk area. Sort of by making it more difficult to get into that area, it sort of gives more significance to the next part.
The obelisk was it's kind of part of what became a sort of theme for the Egypt levels, which was we have a very small obelisk out at the front and a very large obelisk, this super gigantor obelisk here, and the idea of moving the pieces from the giant obelisk and just whacking them into the little obelisk in order to actually open the Scion room.
When we were sort of trying to come up with a theme for Egypt, we decided early on that we wanted to make Egypt sort of themed around lots of difficult traps. So while we wanted to keep sort of the gameplay in a lot of the rooms very similar to how it was in Tomb Raider 1, we felt that we could spice up long, boring hallways with a good amount of traps, which both made them more interesting and also gave us an opportunity to challenge the player in between sort of the main rooms that they remembered from TR1. So I would say that we've done a fairly good job at making just regular traversal down your average hallway pretty difficult. In Tomb Raider 1, Lara, sort of one of the only difficult things that she could do was make these really large jumps, and so this area was an area where Lara had to sort of leap precariously back and forth between platforms, sort of sticking out along the walls of this room. Now that our current Lara in Tomb Raider Anniversary is way sort of more nimble and attaches to ledges and hangs on a whole lot easier, we had to sort of figure out a way to make a room themed around sort of this large ascent and precarious jumping over a large drop, but still sort of keep it challenging for the player. So we sort of made a fairly more complicated room. We sort of themed around these broken sort of floors of a large chamber that had broken away, and just sort of pillars were remaining that Lara had to traverse up. Alright, Toby, why don't you tell us why there are two sphinxes? One in the beginning and a big one here.
So originally, when we first spec'd out the Egypt area, it was actually once you put the pieces into the obelisk, the doors open and it literally just revealed a room that had the Scion in it. But I was really disappointed with the way that the Sphinx had looked. So actually, on one weekend, I came in and built like the largest Sphinx I could possibly build, right? And it was so cool looking. Basically, we just added this. We added it in and turned it into the actual final part of the Egypt area. And part of what I think what I liked about it was the way that you approached it, because it would be very, I guess the obvious thing would be that you approach it from an angle whereby you can sort of see it from the front or see it from below and get a really good sense of the scale of it. But I wanted to actually come up onto it so that you didn't understand what you were standing on, so that you kind of, it took your mind a while as you walked around it to appreciate that you're actually standing on the back of the Sphinx. So you got that moment would happen when essentially it's hidden from you because of its scale.
And the fog.
That's it. Yes, and the fog. Mm. So after having modelled this gigantic sphinx, I'm trying to turn it into a real level because it hadn't actually been sort of like laid out originally. It was just sort of built as it went along. I ended up just essentially taking a bunch of my test rooms that really pushed Lara's movement to the max. That were basically exploited more interesting combinations of moves and whacked them in as these side rooms around the outside. So it didn't really make an enormous amount of fictional sense, but they were some more interesting sort of movement puzzles.
Yeah, and when we went to recreate them, I mean, the original one, essentially, one side was just sort of pushing a block through a wall, and sort of you had to figure out which way to push the block, and then the other room was themed around sort of sliding down and jumping at the right time onto this bridge.
Yeah, it was sliding direction stuff.
Which worked really well for Tomb Raider 1, but is very easy to do in Tomb Raider Anniversary. So we sort of completely changed the rooms and came up with a brand new puzzle involving the obelisks and the light, and sort of themed both the rooms similarly to sort of try to give the area sort of a theme.
It's cool.
Yeah.
Originally, what I was trying to do with this room was that after having built a gigantic sphinx, I kind of come in another weekend and built even larger sitting down dudes, basically Horus and Osiris. And I thought it would be really cool because there's supposed to be actually a chamber, or like there was rumours that there's a chamber between the actual front paws of the Sphinx in Egypt, and I thought that would be pretty cool to go, and that that's where you would expect your prize to be. But I wanted to do something a bit different, so I had this really tiny little hole that appears after you've finally opened up, done all the side rooms in the big Sphinx room, and then you just sort of go, I wonder what's going to be down there. But it was such a tiny hole, not a grand entrance at all, that you expected nothing much. And then you drop down it, and you literally dropped into a room with two statues that are even more vast than where you came from. And that sort of reveal of actually, and because it was water filled when you dropped in there, you kind of only really saw them when you dived underwater, and you essentially were flying around these massive statues. I thought was a pretty cool way to introduce them.
So this is one of sort of the more interesting changes that we made to Egypt, was moving the Sanctuary of the Scion to the bottom of the level. In the original, you sort of came down and got this one key, and then you were able to go all the way back up to the top, to the stairs, and then go into a little side room, and then the Scion was way up there. But we really wanted to sort of recreate this area as sort of a vault at the bottom of the entire sort of Egypt level. And part of that was us sort of making access into the very back, where you actually can get the third piece of the Scion, gated by the other two pieces of the Scion, almost like they were a key to that you needed before you could gain access to it. And this,
which makes more sense from a story point of view, basically.
Absolutely.
So, mining time. So, it was it's one of the places where we actually did manage to sort of show a bit of the fiction of the world, having Natla technology, crates everywhere, and her minions have been mining away at the site trying to uncover the secrets of the past. And we built into that. We also used this in the first game as obviously, having your weapons removed, adding to the sense of fear of the area, basically. But one of the weird things about it was that there's nothing really stopping you from missing the whole section out, running forwards. Basically, there was the cowboy guy who is sort of got merged with Larson in the remake. He was basically standing in a room or waiting for you. If you went in there without guns, he would pretty much shoot you to pieces. But it was still possible to actually basically run past him if you had enough health packs, and then carry on and not ever do any of it.
Right, so we wanted to address that in the remake, and also some of the we wanted to sort of refine the mines down to a sort of more manageable set of gameplay area, a lot of people, I think, found the mines to be fairly confusing to play through. So we really simplified it down to a couple of key areas that were sort of thematically the same as the original, and then still kept the fight with the now merged Larson / cowboy character at the end, but you can't run through it anymore.
So, coming to rework or rewrite the story for Anniversary, basically the goal was not to rewrite it, but to invest it with some kind of emotional depth. And the point of the story became very quickly how far Lara will go for her obsession, how morally she's willing to stretch herself in order to actually just achieve her goals, because she's extremely single-minded. And the Larson character, therefore, expanded into the real test for her of, are you going to shoot some guy just in order to get what you want? And I think that in games, most people don't actually think about what they're actually doing. They're kind of literally taking someone's life in order to achieve their goals. And I wanted, because we had so little in the way of human killing in Tomb Raider 1, the remake gave us an opportunity to really focus on what a difficult choice that really should be for a person. And so Larson is a very ambiguous character. He's sort of quite a nice guy, sort of. He's an enemy, but he helps Lara a little bit on the sly. Obviously likes her a bit. They have a bit of chemistry going, although obviously Lara has no interest really. And it was this point where we wanted to actually really connect the player with the experience of they want to move forward, Lara wants to move forward, and this guy essentially is standing in the way. We basically create the super action. Instead of it being really for gameplay, it's really for an emotional connection of the player with this act that is basically Lara stepping too far over the line, over the moral line, and taking down this guy and feeling bad about it.
Originally, the kid and fight with the shotgun guy, who I think didn't even have a name in Tomb Raider 1. Yeah, shotgun guy, who's now called Kincaid. So they were sort of separated, and when we were remaking the game, the notion of a guy on a skateboard in this underground skate park seemed sort of ridiculous.
It was pretty funny there in the original, I thought.
So we removed the skateboard boss fight from the game, and instead combined that with the fight with the shotgun guy outside of the pyramid, which I think is sort of was a good decision.
Yeah, and this is the fight that we really went all out on in terms of the cinematic and how intense the whole thing was. Partially because the previous fight with Larson was basically just shooting it, and it was basically extremely simple in terms of the setup. It's much more of an emotional thing, so we wanted to turn Kid and Cole's fight into this massive, extravaganza, I suppose. When we were working out the baddies for the first game, we wanted to have some supernatural sort of creatures, but at the same time I didn't want a muddied and confused sort of that magic is anything can sort of happen type of game. And so the concept of these Atlantean creatures came along, and we used those to be both the mummies and the centaurs and so forth, and we kind of sort of disguised them for the earlier levels in Egypt. They're sort of, if you first see them, they're really well bandaged, and then later on, as the level progresses, their bandages fall off, and you see that there's nasty things going on underneath, and then finally you get to the last level, and you find out that these things are actually being sort of birthed inside the pyramid. So
the Atlanteans were smart enough to make crazy, rabid creatures, but not smart enough to make skin, huh?
Well, they're gonna die anyways.
One step closer.
Armies.
So the center of the pyramid was sort of this giant shaft that went up the middle. In the original game, Lara just sort of jumped from one sort of periphery room to the other off of this main area. And so we really wanted to get Lara back into this big, vast space with the constant fear of falling into the lava in the bottom. And so we sort of cut all of the side rooms off and ended up actually taking some of them and reordering the areas and putting them later in the level. But really we just wanted to let Lara sort of really traverse this big old giant shaft of nothing that leads up to the Scion room at the top.
So we had this concept, well, in the original one, of Lara meeting her ultimate nemesis, a copy of her spawned by the pyramid under Natla's orders that did exactly what she did. And I remember it was the whole concept of the monsters from Tomb Raider 1 in the pyramid was that they had no skin on them, right? So I thought it was really bizarre. I really liked this character because the doppelganger was a super skinny version of Lara, so naked that she didn't even have skin on. And I wanted to have this sort of this real kind of repulsion, but at the same time caricatured her towards the manga sort of sense of what is attractive. So really big eyes and big cute big cute manga eyes and stuff like this. So that when you got to look at her, it was the most disturbing thing that you could possibly see. You see this mirror of yourself. Ah, yeah, it's great.
You're sick.
Obviously, this is as the culmination of the story. I wanted to get the feeling that, well, Lara really has sort of reached her goal. Like, you can't ask for better than what Natla offers to her. Essentially, it's not just all of the knowledge that she could ever want of the past, but it's also sort of real ultimate power, right? So,
and the culmination of sort of her father's quest to find this
her
artifact.
Father's quest, and then it leads into the mother's quest from Legend as well. So it's really major, and because we'd pushed how far she was willing to go earlier on with Larson, I wanted really for the player to wonder, even though it's basically a remake, therefore we know what choice she's going to make, that she fundamentally is a good person, that would be a really tough choice for her to make. When she does finally throttle back from her own obsessions and choose the good path, I think it makes it a real moment. Obviously, after you kind of understand what it is that Natla's been up to, we wanted to sort of show in the original sort of what the extremes of her sickness would create, her mental sickness. And this sort of weirdy, freaky torso boss fellow was what we came up with. I think having him sort of shuffling around after you is pretty disturbing.
I agree. He was my favorite boss in the original, and I think my favorite boss in the new one in Anniversary. He's just so gross looking, and the way he moves is all freaky and mutated. It's cool. Croft Manor. This was the tutorial area in Tomb Raider 1, and we wanted to bring back Lara's home as one of the playable levels of the game and really expand upon it. We had sort of recreated her home before for Tomb Raider Legend, and so we wanted to sort of expand on what we had done for that game and make an even bigger and more immersive mansion than either Tomb Raider 1 or that game.
Right, yeah. The original Manor was much more of a Tudor style place, and obviously it was totally themed around getting people used to the basic controls. One area that was kind of fun was the main hall, where a bunch of crates were there originally just to sort of get you used to the idea that she can sort of vault over any different height, size changes with the press of a button. And we actually put the Ark of the Covenant in there by the front door, which luckily no one at Lucas noticed. Actually, I don't know if they have the rights to the...
Yeah. Did they trademark the Ark of the Covenant?
I don't know if they can. But anyway, it was a bit cheeky because obviously, yeah. But we had to do a few of those little things.
Yeah. So while we've added the crates back in, we've left out the Ark of the Covenant.
Yes, the trademark. The trademark stuff.
Just in case it is trademarked.
Most sensible.
When we were coming up with the idea for what we wanted to do with the mansion, we decided that we wanted to go back and make a sort of really old school adventure gamey feeling level, a little bit unlike sort of the rest of the gameplay in Tomb Raider Anniversary. So it's all sort of really inventory based with item collection, and then using those items to sort of open up new areas and whatnot. And then onto that, layering in sort of equipment-based exploration. So, once you get your grapple, you can now explore new areas that you couldn't before, gating the player with their inventory, and really sort of just trying to make sort of an interesting side level that worked with the rest of the game, but sort of stood out on its own as a little side thing, since it is technically not part of the main game. In TR1, there wasn't actually an area outside of the manor that you could go and explore, but there was in TR2, and people sort of liked the outdoor stuff, so we decided to add a garden to the Tomb Raider Anniversary remake of the mansion. Though in TR2, the outdoor area was an obstacle course, but since all of that gameplay is now sort of encompassed within our gym area, we wanted to do something else outside, so we decided to make a hedge maze.
And, well, I should say I do hate mazes, right? Like, I mean, that's the one rule I was trying to get across in the first game when we were working with the other level artists was don't make mazes, basically, because they just confuse people and people get lost and frustrated.
Yeah, and that was sort of one of our concerns when we were making this maze, was not just sort of making an endless row of hedges that you sort of wandered your way through aimlessly, but to really put lots of little gardens and landmarks in there so that players would be able to find their way a little bit easier. The music room was originally right sort of off of Laura's bedroom in the original Tomb Raider, but we made it its own room in the remake, and it's sort of the last room that you unlock when you're playing through the mansion level in the game. But we kept all the sort of the things in there. The piano's there, the harp is there. We did take out the workout mat, though. We were questioning why you had a workout mat in her music room when you were remaking it.
It was just, why not? I mean, maybe she gets Winston to play little tunes as she's doing her forward rolls or whatever. Who knows?
Yeah, now we've moved that into the gym now, which seems like a more appropriate place for it.
Yeah.
Winston can still play some ditties. Alright, so thank you for playing through Tomb Raider Anniversary and listening to all of the director's commentary.
Yeah.
It's been actually moderately fun.
Yeah.
And if hopefully you didn't mind listening to us yap on, and you garnered some bit of information that you were actually interested in about the history of Tomb Raider and the remake, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Yep. Thanks.